Peace to everybody. As you know, November is Native American Heritage Month. And no, I am not Native American, but there are stories that I could bring to you about their culture and how they are. And as you can see here in the screenshot is the corn, the beans, the squash, and everything else that they eat. The three staples of Native American food are corn, squash, and beans. Other foods that have been used widely in Native American culture include green, deer meat, berries, pumpkin, squash, and wild rice. So this is what they do eat. They do have corn, squash, and beans, and there's other foods that they use as well. And that includes greens, deer meat, berries, pumpkin, squash, and wild rice. The Native Americans are well reserved for being resourceful people, and when it comes to Native American food, there is no difference. They were well versed at using the ingredients that were readily available to them and for making many different foods with them. Corn and various corn products are abundant in Native American food recipes, and they have lent many of their earliest delicacies to the American culture as a whole. So the Native Americans were very well reversed for being resourceful people, and they still are today. They were well versed at using the ingredients that were readily available to them. So whatever ingredients that was available to them, this is what they use. And of course they make all kinds of cuisines that we don't know nothing about. Corn and various corn products are abundant in Native American food recipes, and they have lent many of their earliest delicacies to the American culture as a whole. So as a whole, this is what they have brought to the American culture, their earliest delicacies. Corn is such a big staple in Native American culture that not only do they frequently cook with corn as we know it, but they also use what's known as harnilla or blue cornmeal. Harnilla can be ground into flour and used for baking tortillas and other starches. So, as they call it, blue cornmeal or harnilla, they use it to bake tortillas and other starches. So whatever other starches they use, that's what they use it for. Native American food also consists of the resourceful use of meat. Besides deer, the Native Americans frequently ate rabbits, prairie dog, beaver, lamb, buffalo, mutton, and pork. Using wild grains and vegetables were also commonplace in the Native American diet, along with squash, sage, wild onions, cabbage, pumpkins, and cactus played a vital role in the Native American food. So they had other source of foods as also besides deer. They had rabbits, prairie dog, beaver, lamb, buffalo, mutton, and pork. Using wild grains and vegetables were also commonplace in the Native American diet as well. And of course, along with it, they had squash, sage, wild onions, cabbage, pumpkins, and cactus. And this played a vital role in their food. So they had all these resources that they needed to make what they wanted to eat. Along with the staples and animal sources, herbs also played a vital role in early Native American food. Many of the earliest forms of medicine were derived from these food sources as well. The Native Americans were masters at making poultices, teas, and herbal remedies. They used herbs and plants such as peppermint, spearmint, clover, sage, and rose hips to make teas and other foods. Today's society and culture owes much what is learned about food and the natural American resources to the early Native Americans. So not only did they have the food, but they also had the herbs as well to make teas on their own. They didn't have to go to the store to buy tea bags or anything. They used herbs to make their teas. Also, the herbal remedies as well. They used such plants as peppermint, spearmint, clover, sage, and rose hips to make teas and other foods as well. So it wasn't just all about meats or starches or anything like that. Also, the herbs also played a role in this as well, and they do real well, making everything that they can every day for their families and their elders and whoever else that may want to come by and taste the food as well. Farming and agriculture, along with hunting, were very important parts of Indian life. The food eaten was from the earth, and none of it was wasted. Depending on where the tribe came from, would usually depend on the different foods that were eaten. Indians from the plains would often hunt and eat buffalo. So wherever the Native Americans hunting grounds are, that's what they eat. They would also eat buffalo. Indians from the plains would often hunt and eat buffalo, so that's what they would eat. All the foods came from the earth, none of it was wasted. They made sure everything was eaten. Um, and of course, depending on where the tribe came from, would usually depend on the different foods that were eaten as well. Every part of the buffalo was used, from the bones to the meat to the hide. The skin and fur made excellent covers for living and traveling in the cold snow, and the food was delicious. Buffalo stew was often made, as well as buffalo meat seared over an open fire for the Indians, such as the Eskimo. Seal and whales were often eaten for each tribe. Animal parts were always utilized in some shape or form. The bones could be used as weapons and the hides as drums. So the animal hides, yes, they are used for drums. Um, the the bones, they can be used for weapons. Every part of the buffalo was used. In other words, you make stew meat. Buffalo stew was often made, as well as buffalo meat seared over an open fire. So they made sure all parts of the buffalo was eaten. They take their hides and make drums of them, but they have to dry out the hides first. Other examples of Indian food would be the fruits and vegetables that were both harvested and grown. Corn or maize is a very common food that was grown and consumed by the Native Americans. Berries of all kinds that were found in the woods were also eaten. Even melons and pears were choice foods of the Indians. Beans and squash were grown and mushrooms were harvested. The Indians would also eat various game birds, fish such as salmon, and nuts. Their diet was very well balanced and healthy, and everything was eaten purely and naturally. So they had all kinds of food, and now they had vegetables, fruits, berries of all kinds that were found in the woods were also eaten as well. They also had melons and pears were choice foods of the Indians. Beans and squash were grown and mushrooms were harvested. So the mushrooms would be harvested. And so this way they can have all this food to have. Also, there were game birds that they had, fish such as salmon and nuts, and it all depends on what kind of nuts that they had. It could be, I don't know, chestnuts or whatever they had to eat. I don't know what kind of nuts they had, but they had them. The Native Americans' diet was very well balanced and healthy, and everything was eaten purely and naturally. So they ate naturally. Nothing went to waste. Everything was used as their food source, and they made sure nothing was going to go to waste ever. Today, there are a great deal of wonderful recipe books that can be found on Indian food. The tradition of Indian cooking lives on among family members and friends, and there is even a special food pyramid designed specially for the Native American to be sure they are getting the nutrition they need. Food has always been an integral part of the Indian way of life, and the traditional recipes can be shared for many generations to come. So, so now there are recipes, books for the Native American food that can be found on Indian food. The tradition of Indian cooking lives on among family members and friends as well. So they pass these foods down from generation to generation. So this way they know where they come from and where the foods are coming from. So this is why they have these wonderful recipe books now. Also, there is a special food pyramid designed especially for the Native Americans to be sure they are getting the nutrition they need. So this is what they have, and it is also for many generations to come. So when the Native Americans, when they have children, then their children have children. So this is passed down from one generation to the next. So this way they'll know what all kinds of foods that the Native Americans were eating. Many tribes, such as the Lakota, have handed down Indian food recipes from one generation to another. The Lakota was also known by the name of Sioux, a nomadic tribe. They only hunted and ate grass, eating animals. This was because they believed in the circle of life, and when they died, their bodies became grass to feed the animals. So the Sioux Indians, they were also known as the Lakotas. They had handed down Indian food recipes from generation to another. The Lakotas were also known by the name of Sioux, and I'll tell you right now, the Sioux Native Americans are wonderful people. They are beautiful people. They never harm nobody or anything unless provoked. A nomadic tribe, they only hunted and ate grass-eating animals, so that's all they ate. So, say like for example, they would eat wildebeest or whatever other animals that they could find that are grass eaters. This was because they believed in the circle of life, and when they died, their bodies became grass to feed the animals. So the animals would feed on them as soon as the bodies became grass. Buffalo meat has more protein and less fat than beef. It also has less cholesterol, yet a mere 4 ounce um, provides more protein than a half a dozen eggs. Wasna, because of the protein it contains, can raise a person's iron level within 15 minutes. Today's Lakota believe that their ancestors did not suffer from diabetes, heart disease, or cancer due to the healing powers of Wasna. So the buffalo meat has more protein than it does ground beef. All right, and of course it has less cholesterol, and yet a mere 4 ounces provides more protein than a half a dozen of eggs. Now, I never had buffalo meat, so I have no idea what it tastes like. Wasna, because of the protein it contains, can raise a person's iron level within 15 minutes. So it doesn't take very long for your iron level to raise up. Today's Lakotas believe that their ancestors did not suffer from diabetes, heart disease, or cancer due to the healing powers of Wasna. So, to the healing powers, they didn't have no diabetes, no heart disease, no cancer, no anything because of all these healing powers that they use. And it's a wonderful thing that they do. The Lakota diet was high in protein, and often the tribe either had much food to eat, such as after they killed a buffalo, or very little. One of the traditional Indian food recipes that the Lakota have passed through the generations was wasna. Wasna is a Lakota word for the word with the W-A meaning anything and the sna meaning ground up. Although non-Lakota people refer to it as Pem, Pem, Pemmican, the dish consisted of dried buffalo, dried berries and fat or bone marrow. The Lakotas would grind the ingredients together with a pounding stone. Wasna was a very good source of protein, and the Lakota valued this traditional recipe not only as a food but also as a healing instrument. Therefore, wasna is often seen as a sacred food and was often used in ceremonies and rituals. So that's what they did. They used the food as ceremonies and rituals. Um, the Lakota diet was high in protein, so their protein level really was high, and often tried either had much food to eat, such as after they killed a buffalo. So the buffalo had high protein in it, or very little. And one of the traditional Indian food recipes that the Lakota have passed through the generation was wasna. Wasna is a Lakota word with the wa meaning anything and the sna meaning ground up. So anything they had, they would eat. The Now, although non-Lakota people refer to it as Pem Mission, this dish consists of dried buffalo, dried berries, and fat or bone marrow. That's all it consisted of. There was nothing else. The Lakotas would grind the ingredients together with a pounding stone. So they use a pounding stone to grind their ingredients together, but also as a healing instrument. Therefore, wasna is often seen as a sacred food and was often used in ceremonies and rituals. Another of the Indian food recipes that is a favorite is Lakota plum cakes. This recipe includes dark raisins, purple plums, toasted hazelnuts, butter, flour, baking soda, cloves, honey, and maple syrup. So this is what they had also of their favorite foods, and of course it's the Lakota plum cakes. And it included dark raisins, purple plums, toasted hazelnuts, butter, flour, baking soda, cloves, honey, and maple syrup. So that's what they have to make their plum cakes. If you want to learn more about Indian food recipes the Lakota used in the past is still used today, there are many books available on the subject. So there are a lot of information about the Native American foods of what they have. Leave your comments below. I am out.